Oh, we're gonna have a barn burner of a post show.
Oh hell yeah,
But to do that, we're gonna raise a barn during the main show.
I think I actually signed in with my account by accident. I don't know, because my face shows up instead of the DTNS.
Yes, I see that.
Sorry. I'll hang up and I'll invite myself in through DTNS.
You can just hang there. It's fine.
Yeah. And show
That's just a weird face.
You have such beautiful.
I'd rather have your face weirdly showing up down there for the video users than have you have to log back in and log back and then make noise during. It's fine. Just leave it. It's good.
Hey, where's the ham sandwich? All right, shutting up.
All right,
the old Smilin' Chang.
Slippin' Jimmy and Smilin' Chang. Here we go.
Hello Daily Tech Show listeners, I am Dr. Spatzel. The Daily Tech News Show is brought to you by listeners just like you. If you would like to become a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/acedtech. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
This is the Daily Tech News for Thursday, March 19th, 2015. I'm Tom Merritt. Joining me today, Justin Robert Young, back on the show, back in the house. How were your travels about these United States this past week? Good seeing you over the weekend, man.
Yeah, no, it was very simple. It was just me returning home to the sunny, windswept hamlet of Oakland, California, and I'm actually here for a little bit. I'm here for like another week, which is shocking and amusing.
That is, I'm sure there are people out there like, really? A week? A week is not that long. A week for Justin Robert Young.
Pretty long.
Yeah.
Rolling stone.
We've got some good stuff to talk about regarding a Pew Research report about what people in, I think it's around 32 developing and emerging countries think about the internet. Hint, not very good for your morality. But let's start with some headlines. The next web reports Tag Heuer, Intel, and Google announced a partnership at the Baselworld Watch Fair. Tag will launch an Android Wear watch with Intel hardware by the end of the year. Intel previously has partnered with Fossil on smartwatches. Oh, I've done it on witches too. That was not reported. And powered a smart bracelet called Mica, M-I-C-A. This is Tag saying, we're not just going to do a watch that like notifies you when your phone rings. We're going to do a full-on Android Wear watch. That'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm. And witches ain't spit, but brooms and sticks. Starting on the Apple Watch's pre-order date of April 10th, customers will have up to 15 minutes to check out and try on the watch at an Apple store. 9 to 5 Mac talked to sources briefed on the upcoming changes, who say that each store will set up 10 or more try-on stations. 4 different zones will be covered in these try-on stations, so go ahead and start writing them down and penciling yourself in if you would like an Apple Watch. Zone 1. Employees will help customers try on the entry-level Sport Edition. Zone 2 is for sales, for customers. Zone 2 is for sales. Zone 3 is for questions. And Zone 4, well, if you have to ask, Tom, you can't afford it. Hint, hint, it's the Apple Watch Edition Gold Bling Bling Festival.
Do you have to elevate up to that zone?
Really, no.
Pile of money.
Go ahead and scan the embedded chip that you were given as a baby when you entered into this enriched upper-crust society. Apple is also considering try-on appointments if things get too busy. This is kind of weird. This is the Apple experience, and we knew this was coming from the Johnny Ive bio that came out a few weeks ago. But by and large, there has been a very Spartan, bohemian sort of element to the Apple Store experience. You walk in, everything's on tables, you buy it. The super rich people come in and buy it. The people who just have enough money to buy an iPhone come in and buy it and have the exact same experience. This is, man, I can see this becoming, the stump speech for a future presidential candidate on this state of America. There are now 2 Apple stores.
Well, in all fairness, I'm sure all of us can walk up to Zone 4. Like, we're joking about if you have to ask, you can't afford it. Doesn't mean you'll be able to buy the watch, but if you want to try on the Gold Watch, Apple will be more than happy to let you have your 15 minutes of Gold Watch if that helps you get a sparkle in your eyes, and maybe plunk down for the $349 that maybe you can scratch together for the sport watch if you want. They're not going to stop people from putting it on. That's
No.
for sure.
I almost wonder if it would have been better for them to just have special boutiques, just pop up boutiques where it could just be all about that velvet glove.
Well, I think they're doing that also. I read that, I can't remember the name of the department store, but a very high-end store has an Apple Watch section now for its high-end clientele. So they're, I think it's smart of Apple to say, like, oh yeah, we're going to put the gold watch right there on the table next to all the watches, because we're not going to judge you. We don't know if you have $17,000. Maybe you're some rich startup kid who still wears T-shirts and jeans and rides a skateboard but can afford a $17,000 watch. Why not?
Who knows?
It's not me. And Gadget reports Opera announced it has acquired VPN company SurfEasy. Senior Vice President of Products Nitin Bhandari says his team has concrete plans, that's a quote, to integrate personal privacy products from SurfEasy into the Opera browsers. Everybody's trying to figure out how they can pitch protecting your privacy as a commercial advantage, and Opera's no exception here. Justin, I think this is really smart if they come out and say, hey, guess what? Especially if there's a free tier to it, Opera has built-in VPN. Nobody's going to see your browsing when you use Opera.
You look at Opera like a third-party presidential candidate, a Ross Perot, a Ralph Nader. It's not that Opera is going to conquer Safari and Chrome or even Spartan, whatever the new Microsoft offering is. It is that you hope that those features are so popular and so easily integrated that it then becomes a standard that these other larger browsers want to take them on. And I think this is a great idea.
You've been reading a lot about presidential elections today, haven't you?
It's what I do, Tom. Got range anxiety? The Verge reports Tesla will release software updates with a range assurance app that runs in the background. Communicates with Tesla's network of chargers, assuring that you will have to click twice to pass one by. The app warns Model S drivers if they risk having less energy in their batteries than it will take to get to the nearest charger. Tesla will also introduce a trip planner that will take into account charger locations on long-distance trips. The update will be released within 2 weeks.
This is a triumph of user interface design. I mean, they're basically not adding any tech here. They're just saying, oh, we always know where all the chargers are, and we can estimate pretty closely how much battery life and range you have left. We should marry those two pieces of information for people in a way that makes it really hard for them to accidentally drive too far to where they can't get back to a charger.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway is hey, look, here's another reason to buy a Tesla, or here's a reason why Tesla coming down in price could be a major player almost immediately, because your car doesn't immediately depreciate not only in value but also in features as soon as it drives off the lot. It can continue to evolve past a certain level like any other large price hardware purchase that you make. This also might as well be called the who is it? The Forbes. It was the Forbes article that came out like 2 or 3 years ago about the guy who said he ran out of charge and couldn't find a supercharger with the Tesla. It is a gigantic middle finger to that, as Tesla went very much on the offensive to defend the fact that he had more than enough energy to get to places, and then pulled up the data that had been fed back to their servers to prove their case. This is them saying, doesn't matter. You will be able to know that you need to get a charger. You will know how to get there based on our technology, which I think is exactly where they needed to go.
I can almost guarantee that as soon as this update drops, that reporter's getting in a car and trying to figure out how to make it not work so he can do a follow-up piece.
Of course.
Reuters reports in an interview with Bloomberg TV Virgin Group's founder Richard Branson, quote, "We have teams of people working on electric cars, so you never know. You may find Virgin competing with Tesla in the car business as we do in the space business." Now, of course, he means SpaceX, which is owned by Elon Musk, the way Tesla is owned by Elon Musk. He didn't mean to imply that Tesla makes space machines. Virgin Group spokesman Nick Fox told Reuters, quote, "We are working with the Virgin Formula E team to develop the plan for next season's cars." They make race cars. "Our aim is to build a leading engine and car for next season. Maybe, ultimately, that could be used in the broader car market in the future." In other words, backpedal from what the boss said. We're not putting out an electric car next year.
I love Richard Branson. He is a hero of mine. I believe his autobiography is called, his first autobiography was called "Losing My Virginity." It is great and a must-read, but he's a bit of a blowhard. And to insinuate that Virgin Galactic competes with SpaceX to correct him in terms of space travel is a laughable idea. They have completely different aims.
I'm trying to think of a good parallel. It's like saying that, I run a Motel 6. We're right up there with the new JW Marriott's.
I mean, well, they even have different purposes. Virgin Galactic is purely let's bring you into, it's barely defined as space tourism, so you can say you've been to space. SpaceX is about building rockets and leasing rocket technology to people to bring literally anything to space, and also Mars colonization. They're only in the fact that we technically say that they are going to space. Are they in any way similar?
Yeah. I'm not even sure we need brand. I would normally say, like, hey, more competition, the better. So many electric car makers out there. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I don't even think we need Virgin to make electric cars. Self-driving cars, maybe. I'd like to see them jump into that.
Virgin being involved in markets, I think, has always been a very, very good thing. They're a great company, and they always seem to tack more on the, like, hey, why don't we just do this because everybody's asking for it kind of side of things, which is very good. And I love to see them as a player there. But, I mean, come on, homie. You're not really making an electric car, and you're not really competing with SpaceX in terms of space travel. You're doing another thing. That's a fine thing.
The parallel is exactly what he's doing. He makes electric race cars. Totally different than cars meant to drive on the road.
Yeah, and for all we know, Virgil Branson is likely smarter than both of us put together, and that's exactly what he meant. Is like, hey, look, we might be competing in the same way we do, which is not really at all right now. So, who knows? All I'm saying is that I'm still hoping for my invite to Necker Island.
Absolutely.
TechCrunch reports Android Auto is live for devices running Android 5.0 Lollipop or later. Of course, that doesn't do you much good unless you have a compatible car stereo system. That means the US and UK and a model from, that means in the US and the UK, a model from Pioneer. Android Auto apps are now available on Google Play, including Pandora, Spotify, SoundCloud, and more.
Yes, so all I have to do is live in the US and UK, go buy a specific model of Pioneer head end, aftermarket, put it in my car, and then I can take advantage of Android Auto. But hey, it's live. So
I can finally get Pandora on my car stereo.
I could also do an aux jack. I don't know. CNET reports that U.S. revenue generated from streaming music like Pandora and Spotify eclipsed sales of CDs for the first time last year, according to the Recording Industry Association of America, RIAA. Streaming music sales were $1.87 billion in 2014 compared to $1.85 billion in CD sales. CD revenue dropped 12.7%. Streaming revenue jumped 29%. Now, digital downloads still are the king, making up the biggest chunk at $2.58 billion, though that fell 8.7%. Total music sales also fell in the U.S. 0.5%, almost flat, to $6.97 billion last year. But this is one of those mile markers where we're like, really? People still buy CDs? And now we can say, yeah, not so much anymore. It's the third most popular way to get your music now.
These are all, this is Aliens versus Predator for the recording industry, to look at like, okay, well, it took until 2015 for, the unbroken momentum of services like RDO and Spotify to overtake what used to be our last, the way that we have built empires to take second place behind digital sales, which in and of itself has some chinks in the armor. It's interesting to see. The question is how far this goes in terms of streaming services and what happens as you saw some of the splintering with like Taylor Swift, and some of the bigger acts have made a lot of noise. What happens when those new deals, because eventually everyone's going to come back to the table and make deals, what those do to the pricing on these streaming services, and whether or not that either hinders or the momentum is so strong that people just buy these streaming services anyway.
Yeah, my theory is that we'll see these free tiers, as people get used to streaming music services, become less necessary. Spotify won't need to offer a really robust free tier to convince people to do it. It will become normal, at which point they'll start making a lot more money, and I think this revenue starts to bump back up. That's my guess.
I'll tell you, you have a rosier idea on it than I do, but
than almost anyone does, frankly.
Fortune reports that Cbit Alibaba founder and CEO Jack Ma showed off a facial recognition feature meant to be used with Alipay. Ma called it Smile to Pay. It works by comparing a photo taken at the point of purchase with a stored photo. Smile to Pay will come to China first, and then other countries.
Smile to Pay. See, this shows that it doesn't take a Silicon Valley company to come up with a dumb name for something that people have tried before.
Yeah.
It also doesn't mean it won't work this time.
Well, how excited are you to give a photo to... I mean, I was weird when Radio Shack used to ask for my number when I wanted to buy batteries. I would be very weirded out if they asked for a photograph of me.
Yeah. Well, think of it. I mean, if you don't know Alipay, think of it like PayPal. If PayPal said, hey, want to put your photo on file? Then you can pay with your face.
Which I guess I do have my photo for PayPal. So, I mean, if that's the case, then maybe it would be the same thing. But
yeah, it's probably the same thing. I don't have my photo in PayPal. You do?
Here in the Bay Area, you have a lot of places that are either cash or PayPal only. And so you have their PayPal Pay right there next to you, where it recognizes that you're right next to it. You slide.
Sure. It's like Square. I did have my face on file with Square for the same reason. All right, I get it. TechCrunch reports Rethink Robotics, the company responsible for the teachable industrial robotic arm Baxter, I believe we've mentioned on the show before, has released a smaller, lighter version named after my dog, possibly, called Sawyer. While Baxter was meant to repeat the same simple task again and again, like sticking things in a box, for instance, Sawyer is aimed for tasks that require more agility and flexibility, just like my dog. Baxter and Sawyer can be used together to address 90% of the manufacturing tasks that cannot be automated with existing technologies. Sawyer costs $29,000, weighs 42 pounds. It's about what my dog weighs. Can carry up to 9 pounds, reach up to a meter, has a barcode scanner, object recognition, and includes force sensing joints to locate parts in a semi-structured environment. Go watch the 50-second video that they've got. It's embedded at the TechCrunch article we have in the show notes. It's almost too cute to be an industrial robot arm. So it's weird to think of it in an industrial, dirty factory setting, but kind of amazing.
The next web reports Pebble has pledged $1 million toward the development and support of smart strap projects for the new Pebble Time watches. Smart straps plug into special ports to extend functionality of the strap, or extend Pebble functionality to the strap. Pebble highlighted concepts from Speed Studio with modular function-specific strap pieces and Spark I/O, which adds cellular connectivity. Developers should tweet at Pebble or email devsupport@getpebble.com with ideas. That's rad.
Yeah, that port is one of the things that I think people forgot after the Time announcement, because the interface is so cool. Everybody focused on that, and rightly so. But that port, depending on what people do with these straps, I mean, Seed, which by the way is spelled with 3 E's, has done Arduino stuff before. So it's like basically making their own little Arduino set for Pebble. There's some really cool stuff here.
And really the idea of hardware startups, Pebble being a huge step forward on that, the idea that sons of Pebble can now come and benefit the ecosystem are rad.
Open source hardware, not that that's exactly what they're doing, but it's got its roots there. It's got its influence there. Time now for some news from you. This comes from our subreddit, dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com, as do many of our stories each day, but I always like to highlight a couple. For instance, the Corley, _Corley, regularly submits stuff. We don't always mention the Corley's pieces, but we thank the Corley and everybody else that submits stuff. Get in there and at least vote. dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. Corley sent us this Engadget story reporting the success of a Google balloon delivering an internet connection from Chile to Australia. Geographically challenged folks, those are two different continents halfway around the world from each other. Chile's in South America. Part of Google's Project Loon, the balloon was launched from New Zealand and crossed the Pacific to Chile, 5,500 miles away. After testing the balloon's command functions and airborne LTE network, they sent it back across the Pacific to Australia and tested internet connectivity, achieving 2 hours of connectivity in places where it might not occur otherwise. The tests are giving Google a better picture of how Project Loon will scale.
Very, very, very exciting stuff. And I would like a Loon balloon over Oakland. If I can just go ahead and request it now. It's just a real quick trip.
You're kind of low on the list, though. They're going for places that got nothing at all, but it would be pretty rad. I agree.
See some parts of Oakland. Burke80 submitted the Tech Dirt story highlighting the Illu mask. Let's assume that you might find a light therapy mask covered in LEDs a desirable product. You'd normally have to pay hundreds of dollars for one. The Illu mask is only $30. How could this have been done? By breaking it is how. Even through LEDs should last 30 to 40,000 hours. Illu mask programs in a restriction that only lets you use the mask 30 times for 15 minutes. Each time before you have to throw it away and buy another. However, as Tech Dirt explains, a screwdriver, a paperclip, and some gentle hands can reset the Illu mask and the Illu mask use count, letting you use it for the life of the bulbs.
So it basically DRM'd their LEDs. Incredibly wasteful.
Very weird. But I guess, the price comes down enough that they can make it a thing. It seems odd that they would cripple their own product like that, and
they're making a wager here. They're saying, okay, we can market it as $1 per use, much cheaper. Hey, I can't afford $500 for a therapy mask, but I can afford $30, and then after those 30 uses, then they're like, oh, you can afford another $30, right? And you get people to buy it who wouldn't otherwise, even though they'll end up spending more. Now, the key feature here is that you have to force that thing to break so that they'll be forced to go buy another one. And actually with a soldering iron, you can fix it permanently. You don't have to keep resetting it to 30. You can just get rid of the limitation altogether.
That would be a great aftermarket service. It's just, immediately just have your Illu mask sent to us from the manufacturer. We will send a $30 product that will actually work. This seems like a DivX level bad idea.
Oh, yes. Well said. All right, let's talk a little bit about that Pew Research survey we mentioned at the top of the show. They talked face-to-face with people in 32 emerging and developing nations and asked them about internet usage. And as you might expect, internet usage is lower there than in other parts of the world. On median, 44% of people surveyed in each country use at least the internet occasionally. Now, there's a wide variety of rates. Some countries were down in the single digits. Others, like Russia, was included in this survey and was up in 78% level. But on average, on the median, it was 44%. They found that usage was strongly related to per capita income. In fact, computer ownership, age, in other words, younger, the more likely you were to use the internet, your ability to speak English, and a high level of education all had the biggest impact on whether you used the internet or not. However, once you started using the internet, 2/3 of those they talked to who use the internet accessed it daily. Now, one of the things that they asked people about, which yielded some very interesting results, was, do you think the internet is a good influence? And they broke that down. Do you think it's a good influence on education? 64% said yes. Personal relationships, 53% said yes. Do you think the internet use is good for the economy? 52% said yes. Then they got to politics news in particular. Like, do you think this is good for politics and news and government? Only 36% said yes, but only 30% said no. A lot of people are like, I don't know. I don't know if it's any good for that or not.
Yeah.
Then they said, do you think the internet is a good influence on morality? 42% said no, we do not. Only 29% of people said yes. And then one more little caveat here. When they broke down the answers between the people who actually already use the internet and the people who have never used the internet, people who use the internet were more positive overall in all of these questions, but they still were not above 50% in thinking that the internet was a good influence on morality. Justin, are we amoral jerks for using the internet?
Yeah. All right. I have a problem with the use of the term morality because, and this is very, very interesting because you don't want to look at this in a lens that is very either Western focused, and you don't want to look at this in a lens that is even worse, just American focused in terms of how we imagine, what, like if it says morality, we just imagine what our morality is and whether or not it is good or bad for how we define morality. So I guess if you are going to emerging and developing nations, all of which probably have a different idea on what this means, that you have to have some sort of blanket one-size-fits-all thing that encompasses family values, traditional roles, where, even it breaks it down to the basic, like, thou shalt not kill or steal or something like that, which obviously those are Christian words, but are generally held to be, things that are productive building blocks of all societies. It's hard to look at that and not say that on some level you can say that the internet is changing elements of at least one of those, and that people would not be comfortable with that change. But I don't know if how we read it as, oh, the world thinks that the internet is perverting their morality, is necessarily A, what the respondents meant, or B, any kind of helpful data point.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because you're going to see a lot of headlines that say, developing world thinks internet bad for morality. That's not what they asked. They said increasing use of the internet has had a good influence or a bad influence on morality. Now, what happened is 42% answered yes. The increasing use of the internet has had a bad influence on morality. That doesn't mean they think the internet is necessarily bad for morality. They think that it is having a bad influence on morality. In other words, it's not helping, is what I'm trying to say. A different way of answering that question might give you a different result. Do you think that the internet actually makes people less moral? Might give you a very different results here. But they're like, is it a bad influence on morality? And people might, I think you nailed it, Justin. People say, well, it's definitely changing things, especially because it's the rich and the young that are using it more often, and those are often the sectors of society that are seen as less moral. So it seems fairly innocuous for people to say, oh, excellent for education, amazing for personal relationships. In fact, 82% of the people who use the internet are using it for social networks in these 32 countries. That's the first thing they do, is they go and they start talking to family. So they're not saying the internet is dangerous. They're saying, is it a bad influence on morality? There's a lot of things on the internet that aren't good. So I'm going to say yes. Not for me, not for my family. We don't look at the porn. We don't look at the sites that are undermining our particular belief system, but they're out there. We know that, so I'm not sure that I could say that it's good. That's the way I would interpret it.
What these numbers would be asking American respondents. I think American respondents might say that it is a detriment to morality, and I don't necessarily mean folks in the heartland, the denizens in the fictional town of Footloose, who might think that
right, or Greenville, Illinois, as it was called when I was growing up.
I mean, like cosmopolitan, coastal living people like you and me, Tom, who might say, yeah, you want to know what? With all the stuff that I see people write in comment sections, I can't imagine how much damage it is doing to what I would consider to be common morality, the morality that you wouldn't call a stranger these kinds of names, that you wouldn't refer to the most base levels of discourse just because somebody's dog was in a video or something like that.
Frankly, and I don't mean, I'm not trying to Godwin's modern day Godwin's law our discussion here, but you ask anybody on any side of Gamergate if they think the internet is a bad influence on morality, and they'll say yes, because they think that the other side from them is immoral.
So I guess what that means to me is if this sweater fits literally everybody, and when we don't know whether or not that's the case, I mean, it would be curious to see what the numbers on an American focused or a Western influence focused a poll would be. But that's why I don't know how much we can read into morality specifically. I think like politics, economy, personal relationships, education, that's good data. That's very interesting to see that, like, hey, look, people who are just in emerging nations who might not have a long and storied, born with an iPad in their hands kind of relationship with the internet are looking at things in this way that is in line with how we would imagine, the positive trends of the internet to be. Morality, it's like I would love to see that broken out into, do you think the internet is more or less likely to have somebody steal? Do you think the internet is more and less likely to have somebody call someone a name or to consider their sexuality or something like that? Like, break out all that into specific things, and I think we will get a fuller, more complete picture of how people around the world look at the internet. And which the funny thing about all this is that it's really just looking at themselves and other people. Like the internet is the great mirror, and any problem we have with it is really the problem with the input, which is submitted by us, the dear denizens of this realm.
I'm curious if somebody could dig up a similar survey, and I wonder if it was even done, about other new technologies such as cable television or just television at all, or the movies. All of these things, when they first come along, are seen as threats to morality by a lot of people. So it doesn't surprise me that, people in any part of the world see that as something. And in fact, the fact that it's only 42% means it's still not the majority. There's a lot of people who are on the fence, like, I don't know, good, bad, I couldn't tell you. I think what's more interesting here to me, and we don't, we haven't talked about it as much, but it's also something that a lot of people already know. In these 32 countries, the phone is the access method for a lot of people. You can't afford to have a computer in your house, but you might be able to afford a phone. In fact, 84% of the people surveyed own a phone. That's compared to the 90% in the U.S. Now, those are feature phones in a lot of cases, not smartphones. But a lot of those feature phones have very minimum ability to access the internet through things like internet.org, or M-Pesa, or various text messaging things. When you want to go actual smartphone with internet access built in, only 24% own a smartphone, but that's still a bigger chunk than own computers. So when you see Facebook and Google moving into these markets, it's because they want to take advantage of that growing mobile market for sure.
And it is the only way that they are going to get to them. Facebook. At a certain point with their growth curve, past the few billion mark, you kind of realize, like, wait a minute, like, they're going to hit everyone in the world, at some point. And to do that, to get worldwide connectivity over these services, you need to use the tools that they have in their hands, and those are phones, feature phones in many cases, and not computers.
All right, let's talk about our pick of the day. It comes from Rich in lovely Cleveland. He says, I know most people in your audience know about Gazelle as a place to go to sell used electronics, but I recently discovered they are an excellent place to buy them as well. They list their items on their eBay storefront and list their condition from poor to very good, give clear explanations of what each category means. Their prices are really competitive, and you don't have to fight other people's bids since it's all buy now. Their free shipping is also excellent. I recently bought an iPad mini 2 for 32 gigabytes. It arrived at my door within 30 hours of ordering. The only downside is the inventory fluctuates fairly quickly. So if you see a deal, you should probably jump on it. They are also my go-to recommendation for replacement phones out of contact. Thought your audience should know. And thank you, Rich. It's worth reminding, since I have been on podcasts many a time that Gazelle was a sponsor of. Gazelle's not a sponsor of this podcast. We don't have sponsors on this podcast. But Rich is just pointing out a side of the story that maybe you don't hear that often. It's like, hey, there's a good place to get some stuff, and eBay in general has a lot of good sellers over there of used items still. So thanks for the reminder, Rich.
Rich, thank you so much. I've actually, since Ashley and I have both unhealthily descended into Hearthstone addictions and play on our iPads constantly, her older iPad is really struggling under the weight of, because Hearthstone's a very memory intensive game. A lot of stuff gets done on the device, and this might be a nice little way to pick up something just a little bit more snappy.
Yeah, if you don't mind it having a couple scratches on it, you could actually get a really good deal on something that works really well.
Yeah, it'll be so hilarious when I buy my own iPad at some point.
Send your picks to feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com, and you can find my picks at dailytechnewsshow.com/picks. Message of the day comes from Christian, who says, I'm a little behind the shows, but I want to suggest Dropbox as another example of legitimate use of peer-to-peer file sharing. The LAN sync option will sync your files across computers on your network without each having to go through Dropbox's servers. When setting up a new computer, the first thing I do is install Dropbox and enable LAN sync, which significantly reduces the synchronization process. If doing so on Windows, you have to explicitly give permission for the firewall to allow traffic on that port. That's a great example. You know, I use CrashPlan for my backups, and it has a similar thing that you don't have to pay for if you just want to back up across your own network. So good example, Christian. Thank you for that.
That's great.
Now, before we finish up, we have a live response to yesterday's discussion with Ayaz Akhtar about the person who wrote in suggesting, hey, maybe Apple should buy Nintendo. What is the jury's decision on Apple buying Nintendo?
We have gathered and we have come back with a decision, and that is number one. I think Ayaz is completely correct that Nintendo was way too proud to ever sell lock, stock, and barrel to anything. But if we are to indulge who would be the best suitors for Nintendo or most likely to do it, I don't think that Apple is the company. It is Disney that is the company. Disney has not only under Bob Iger a magic touch for being able to buy the properties that people either didn't think were worth buying, or to woo those in Star Wars' case that people didn't necessarily think were for sale. But they've also got a great track record. I mean, the Muppets have been completely revitalized since they've come under Disney's tenure. Marvel has exploded on a level that I don't think anybody thought was possible, to the point that once thought to be third place IP like Thor, I mean, screw that, F labeled IP like Guardians of the Galaxy outgrosses Superman. And now Star Wars, which according to buzz around Disney, episode 7 is apparently so good that they want to bring J.J. Abrams back for episode 9. You know, obviously gigantic rumor, but if half of that is true and episode 7 is great, it is going to do gigantic, and Star Wars will again be even more omnipresent than it is right now. If you are Bob Iger and you can go to Nintendo and say, hey, listen, like everything that you do, you can now do under our umbrella. We allow the freedom for you guys to continue to direct stuff. All we want is the ability to continually have your IP under our umbrella, and for Nintendo to live forever amongst the modern myths and legends that we already curate and allow to thrive. And that would be my crazy crack smoking hypothesis on who would buy Nintendo.
Tell you, it's the least crazy of the ones I've heard. I mean, I can envision a meeting where Mr. Iger asks Satoru Iwata to sit down and I want you to meet a couple people. This is George Lucas, Kathleen Kennedy. They have a few things to say about the proposal that we're putting forward and some of the concerns you might have. I agree with you right off the top, and I agreed with Ayaz yesterday. I don't think Nintendo has any intention or any willingness to sell themselves. I could be totally wrong about that, but I think it's a pretty unlikely scenario. But, man, that is a compelling idea, because Disney has become the folks who say, look, if you have any inkling of selling and you're worried about the legacy of your property, look at us. Look at what we've done so far.
And you could say, if they can make Guardians of the Galaxy as compelling as they did. Now, obviously, that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They have an entire machine that all they do is create awesome, amazing popcorn movies that make $1 jillion. So one does not equal another. But if Guardians of the Galaxy can make the kind of money that they did under Disney's watch, and the Muppets, which are now coming back to television on Disney Junior, can make the same kind of money and return to relevance in the way that they once did, what could a Legend of Zelda television show? What could a Super Mario television show? You know, it is gigantic, the capacity that Disney could do with them if that was something that they wanted to do.
The possibilities are intriguing. Well, if you want more intriguing possibilities from Justin Robert Young, you should follow him on the Twitters, twitter.com/JustinRYoung, and check out his show Night Attack with Brian Brushwood. You will laugh. It is adult, but it is funny. Nightattack.tv. And Jury More. Tell us about Jury More.
Well, Jury More is the podcast that I'm doing with my lovely fiance, Ashley Paramore. You can follow her at Healthy Addict. But we're getting married in the fall, and we figured this would be a fun excuse for us to do a little couples cast. It is a limited edition kind of thing, because I don't think that couples casts are necessarily healthy or sustainable, but it is a fun little time capsule for us, and you can follow along as well. That is Jury More, JURYMORE.squarespace.com.
Thanks, everybody who supports the show and makes it possible for us to do this. It's the value for value model. We totally ripped it off of Adam Curry, and Adam will say he ripped it off somebody else, but that's where we were inspired to explain it this way. If you get some value out of the show and you'd like to give a little value back and you can afford to do so, patreon.com/acedetect. That's ACEDTECT. Or if you don't want to commit to something like that and you've got some other way that you think you might want to support the show, check out dailytechnewsshow.com/support. We got a store. We sell some stuff that you might want anyway. DTNS mousepad, DTNS t-shirt, stuff like that. dailytechnewsshow.com/support. Yes, Justin.
I got a way that people can support this show without dropping one thin dime.
What is that?
Go on over to t2t2.eu/pod awards. That is letter T number 2.eu/pod awards. You can vote for the Daily Tech News Show for the podcast awards. And the fun thing about going to t2t2.eu/pod awards is that it gives you a very easy bookmarklet, so you can vote for an entire slate of shows that you might already enjoy, including but not limited to Night Attack, The Morning Stream, Film Sack, The Instance, Coverville, as well as this very show. Again, Tom, if you forgot, it's t2t2.eu/pod awards. One vote per IP address per day, and we only have like 3 days left on this thing, so go ahead and hustle out and vote.
I got to get over there and vote myself for security now. That's it. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. You can give us a call, 512-59-DAILY. That's 512-593-2459. And listen to the show live at tunein.alphageekradio.com. Our website is dailytechnewsshow.com. It's Friday tomorrow, which means we'll be back with Darren Kitchen and Len Peralta. Talk to you then.
This podcast is part of the Frog Pants Studios Network. For more information about this and other shows, visit frogpants.com. Audio program so good, it's like you're there.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
I have enjoyed this program, Justin.
I'm glad.
It's exactly what I did. I need a title. What are we going to call this crazy thing?
How can I help?
Do you have a title?
Oh, man. The University at Alabama Birmingham Blazers.
A moral network?
Like a moral or amoral?
A space.
Moral, okay.
Moral space network, although one could switch that to be a moral network with a lowercase M-O-R-A-L.
If I have this right, Justin, in Birmingham they love the governor.
They also love beating Iowa State, which they did, knocking them off a 14-3 seed here on the first day of March Madness.
A moral network, the growing Apple wealth gap. Which watches which? No. There is no Zone 4.
There is no Zone 4. Or
I love that.
the first rule
Smile.
about Zone 4.
Small toupee. So smile. I get it now. The internet isn't always greener. That's pretty clever, too.
It isn't.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I
think those are the best
submitted Chimeras, which was Spider-Man, Luke, and where'd it go?
ones. Mario.
And Mario. Somebody voted for it and it disappeared.
Oh my gosh. Roger, are you here tomorrow for the
No.
showtime itself?
No, I won't be.
Okay. Because I just realized that this service I'm going to is exactly during the show.
Oh,
Ew. Service.
Memorial
That sounds like
service.
church.
I know.
Time.
But no,
Memorial
it's
service. Okay, I got it.
well, I can help
the
out.
Church of the Liberal Upper West Sider.
I can do a bunch of stuff up until 10:45.
All right. Well, Darren and Len usually stick around for a while to keep you company, Tom.
Oh, yeah. We'll be fine with that. When do you have to bug out, Jenny?
It is becoming increasingly obvious that tomorrow's going to be a blip show.
A what?
A beep show.
Oh,
A-
I thought you said a lip show, and I'm like, I don't understand. Gotcha. No, I got you now.
No, it might be that too. I won't lie. So yeah, so it's a disaster, not a disaster, a very involved day.
Mm-hmm.
About that. So it's just fair warning.
So never is what you're telling me.
Yeah, honest to God, I think it might be a day off. I'm sorry.
That is perfectly fair. I'd rather have you tell me that than tell me you'd be here than.
No, it's just shaping up to be like the memorial service is at 6, which means at 5, like it's already going to be at 4 and 5 is already going to be a nightmare. So I think that's the bottom line. Sorry.
Gotcha. No worries.
I kept getting my time zones confused. Like, oh, it'll all be over by the time the show's on. And I was like, oh, no.
Nope. Well, I did that when I was trying to set the hangout from Brian's place. I was like, why isn't it working? And I'm like, oh, because I'm setting it for 1:30, and it's actually 3:30.
Yeah. Yep.
So, Roger and Justin, you didn't hear it because I had accidentally not plugged in Alpha Geek Radio on time. But they were having a very interesting conversation in the pre-show about what Disney does is acquire stories. And if you acquire Nintendo, Roger asked a very good question. What stories are you getting?
The reason I say this is because this is one of the things that Lego did to pull itself back from the brink when they got hold of I don't believe, maybe he was the new CEO, but he was an American, and one of the things he hit upon was like, Legos are great, but and all parents want their kids to kind of be creative and develop their own stories, but kids really latch on, and people really latch on to existing stories and like to expand on that universe, right? Like, I can be Spider-Man, let me invent more stories, in my playtime based on that character, because that character already is fleshed out, and it's an idealized aspect of a person. And so what Lego did was license. The first big one they did was Star Wars, then it was Harry Potter, then Marvel, and that was one of the biggest money raisers that pushed them, from like, oh my God, we're gonna go bankrupt to, hey, we're sitting on a big pile of cash. And I think Disney basically hit on that too. It's like, hey, guess what? There's a bunch of great stories that aren't inside Disney's wheelhouse that we can acquire and add to it. But at the same time, they were also divesting themselves of a lot of things that they thought were, they didn't need to do. For example, we were discussing game development. Disney cut out pretty much all of its internal game development, including the ones they picked up from Lucas when they bought LucasArts. And they closed that down, and they're working with they're basically contracting out the game development, but it's holding on to that IP is incredibly valuable. And one of the questions I posited to Justin is like, what's the Legend of Zelda story? What's the thing that's going to drive people to, I'm going to put Link in space on the moon, or you know what I mean, like some way for someone to take that story and make it more than what was originally there, and add to it, add their own flavor to it, and expand on it, making it even more valuable, even more compelling.
Well, the lesson of the Lego movie is that it would be like a new chance to do something better with Mario, to do something more self-aware and funnier with the Mario franchise.
Like, if you want to look at the promise of the Legend of Zelda IP, you know, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, like there already are these genre stories that you can plug in these kinds of characters into and kind of make very compelling. I think that there are enough tools there that you can make something great. And as you've seen, you know, we'll see how good the World of Warcraft movie that you know, the guy who did Moon
Duncan Jones.
Duncan Jones, right? How good that's going to be, but that's almost the reverse example, is how do you cut down as much story as you've had into something that is coherent in a 2 hours, hour and a half, something like that. So I mean, I think they've got enough. I mean, like there's certainly enough brand value that people, if you had a really awesome trailer, and this stuff happens periodically where you see somebody do a fan trailer or something for Zelda that kind of sweeps the internet and gets, you know, millions of views in like a 3-day span. You got to wonder if that was for real, you know, if there was a good Zelda trailer, what that opening week box office was going to be. The question has never been whether or not, you know, video game IP is good for movies. The question has been, if you make the worst possible version of that, how poor the box office will be just on brand name alone. You know, I think that there's a tremendous amount of potential for a Mario Brothers or a Zelda movie.
I mean, you know, there were. I do remember the Super Mario Brothers movie, which was horrible.
Yeah.
And that could be attributed to the fact that people that were licensing the IP were a little more in it to kind of cash grab, like let's leverage the huge audience that this game has and just pump out something that has their name on it and people will buy it. So I'm curious. I'm not saying that it is impossible. I'm curious to know what that would shape up. If you want to keep the Nintendo IP pure, like, you know, not adulterated, where you're doing mashups of, like, you know, Marvel and Nintendo, where, you know, Super Mario Brothers turns into a crime fighting tag team, you know, thing. Although that would be kind of interesting. Where could you go where you wouldn't necessarily, you know, adulterate? I can see Legend of Zelda. That does have a theme, that's a story, and has multiple iterations. But Super Mario Brothers is always more about the gameplay, you know, and the way you interact with, you know, even in the multiplayer setting that drew in people. I'm trying to think of all the stuff that you would.
Well, I mean, like, look at it more in kind of the Mario Kart universe. Like, there is more storytelling in the Mario Kart, the interactions between Yoshi and Toad and all the different levels and everything, and Bowser, and, you know, you would have to do something that would be Lego movie style absurdist fun with it, and I think that was the problem with the original. The original live action was that they wanted to play it as this, like, you know, halfway 80s action movie, you know, like Arnold Schwarzenegger Commando kind of thing, but with this kind of like kids, you know, wacky, slapsticky sort of thing on top of it, which I think is tonally very weird for that material. But in a world where CGI works as well as it does, and effects are no longer as much of a question as they used to be, to do something insanely fun and absurdist, like, I think that's very well within, and that could be a massive hit. I
just really have a difficult time fleshing fleshing out. Every video game thing. Have you guys seen the trailer for Pixels?
Yeah.
I think it's kind of stupid, but my wife loves it. She's like, "Oh, this is gonna be great." It's like, "Are you kidding me? This just looks like a bunch of old guys are trying to like, hey, remember when we used to go to the arcades and line up quarters so we could play the next round of Pac-Man, Miss Pac?" I think Wreck-It Ralph for me still is the kind of high point of dovetailing a really good story with kind of the video game milieu, in that it wasn't just this one character and this one IP, but it was kind of a conglomeration, a pastiche of all these old and newer games that you can incorporate. I mean, even with like kind of a nod to Halo without explicitly being Halo kind of thing. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the games like Assassin's Creed would make a great movie, right? Because that already has a built. Even GTA. Like that, actually, although it would be kind of a reverse kind of thing
they
where
ripped off all their plots from other movies.
But I'm thinking for games that are heavily less storyfied and more about gameplay and game interaction. I don't know. I might be too old that I can't see outside of the box.
The Last of Us basically is a movie, so it seems like the games are headed there all on their own.
Well, there's certainly been more of a trend in video games to be able to that there has been a reward in putting story first and making it as compelling and engrossing as possible. But I think it's the difference between licensing. Every bit of IP that you license to make a movie doesn't have to be a great book. There's a lot of okay books that have a lot of cool ideas that make better movies because you are able to put a more coherent story and shave things down. In fact, without getting into too many spoilers, I think we're about to see in Game of Thrones, the new Game of Thrones television season, a better version of a lot of the stories that were told over the last 2 books of A Song of Ice and Fire, because they're going to be a little bit more coherent and cut out things that are apparently now superfluous, which now I'm annoyed because I've read, God knows how many pages in the last book with that apparently they're just going to excise an entire bit of plot. That's a whole other thing. Anyway, it doesn't necessarily matter. Like let's say, and just for example, let's say that the last 2 Game of Thrones books were not great and fatty and dumb, but you still have these great characters that you can then rejigger and put into a more coherent story that might not be faithful, but might be better. And that's what I think that you can do on a lot of these other video game IPs that have great iconography. I mean, like, the problem with Super Mario Brothers isn't that it doesn't have a story, it's that it doesn't have a plot. Or maybe I'm getting those two mixed up. It's the plot. It has a great plot. Princess gets captured, guy's got to beat a gigantic dragon to get the princess. Old as time, right? It's everything that you need to get to that point that makes it interesting, and I think that's why
there's no inner life. There's no inner character life.
Yeah, but I mean, like that's why you would have to rip out everything and rebuild it in something that had a great story. Well, in an adaptation like that would be building in those elements that work.
I totally agree with you. But but you were saying before that, like, if Tom, you were saying this, that don't worry about us buying out your company and your IP. We're going to keep them true to form. We're going to make sure that they stay as true as true kind of to the heart of the material as possible. And I'm thinking, like, once you start having to do a bunch of rejiggering with stuff to give you a very compelling story, aren't you already halfway down the path of kind of reneging on, like, let's keep this stuff pure? I mean, I think my greatest worry is that we'll basically end up with more Final Fantasy movies. And whether you talk about the theatrical release or the more recent, I think it was Japanese only theatrical release movie. I mean, to be honest, they were boring and they were incredibly tedious movies for a game that I, at least for up to Final Fantasy VII, I enjoyed playing. And so it's adaptation is always difficult, right? Like when you take Gone for the when you take Gone for the Wind and you made it a movie, you did what you do with Game of Thrones. You cut out stuff that just doesn't would be death on screen. So is there enough in Nintendo's catalog outside of Zelda or Legend of Zelda or Link or whatever that you could plausibly come up with enough movies from? Because Nintendo still is video game first.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
It's about.
can I suggest a radical idea?
Yep.
Which is, what if Disney helped Nintendo come up with new characters for their video games?
So, I mean, that's a point of contention, at least for me, for a point of contention. It's another thing that's always bugged me about DC and Marvel is that they've had these characters that they've created, and they've had for at least a couple of decades, if not longer. It would be great to see new IP that isn't a derivative or isn't in some way like, well, let's take one of the Super Mario Brothers and let's like find his long lost cousin. We'll make a movie about that. He'll be Geppetto. I don't know. Where the thing that DC, people used to be critical of Marvel and DC, where it's like, well, this is the reason why you're rebooting your universe every 2 to 3 years is because you just used up all the stories with this version of Captain America, of Wolverine, of Batman, of Superman. You got to put them in a new universe now. You got to redo their stories, which is fine, but that seems to be kind of a default because all those IPs already have a huge momentum behind them. They have instant brand recognition. They're used in everything from flogging car insurance or insurance with Jerry Seinfeld to Happy Meals, to toys, to video games. And so companies really don't want to mess with that for them because it's an instant win. But developing new IP is a much riskier proposition and doesn't necessarily mean you need to partner up with another company to do it.
I think another thing to point out is that Marvel had successful movies. We may not have think they were nearly as good as the movies they have now, but they had successful movies before Disney bought them. Star Wars has successful movies, and Muppets had successful movies. Nintendo doesn't have any successful movie properties out there, so that is another big jump, another big difference between them.
You could make the argument that Marvel, they had licensed their IP to make successable
movies
with
Nintendo has never licensed their IP to make a successful movie.
They have not, no.
Or a TV show. Even the remember the Super Mario show with
Captain Albano?
Yeah. I remember watching that. It's like, these shows are stupid, but I like Captain Lou Albano, so I'll watch.
Oh no, I thought I dug. I mean, that was right in my wheelhouse, though. I mean, that was right in the sweet spot demo-wise.
I think Dark Redeemer summed it up best in the chat room. Fear leads to mismarketing. Mismarketing leads to bad reviews. Bad reviews lead to suffering.
Indeed. All right, guys, I am out.
I'm also out of the post.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.